Harvard Law School has graduated more black students than any other law school in America but Howard Law School.
People break barriers at Harvard Law School, and they go on to break other barriers out in the world.
They were blazing a trail. They were making a way. And I know this is the way African Americans think about these things, that there will be others, and others will do even better and better.
People like Archibald Grimke, Charles Hamilton Houston, and of course Barack Obama.
I think that if you feel that fundamental link, that your fate is locked up with the fate of others.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
President Obama stands in the shoes of many Harvard Law School graduates who came before him and who took inspiration from that to go out and help transform the world. Isaac Royall Jr. was a slaveholder. He spent a lot of his youth in Antigua, where his father grew sugarcane.
Sugar caning was one of the worst forms of slavery in the Caribbean. Sir Isaac Royall sold those slaves, and the money from that sale was a part of the bequest that created Harvard Law School.
The coat of arms, as most Harvard Law School graduates know, was 3 sheaves of wheat. In 1936, of course, it wasn't very controversial, but by, let's say, 2016, it became incredibly controversial.
George Lewis Ruffin, he was the first black person in the United States to receive legal education.
It was very difficult for African Americans to be even admitted to the bar before the Civil War.
The earliest black graduates of Harvard Law School would have experienced extreme isolation, being an anomaly. It was not proper or considered proper for blacks and whites to mix during that time period.
Many of the early African American graduates spent time in Massachusetts. Some of them were either elected or appointed to local political office. Back then, being at Harvard and playing football was like being in the National Football League today. He was a tough guy, as were all the early African American graduates, because they had to be. They lived in a world that devalued them.
Ruffin began a tradition of 1 or 2 extraordinary black Americans gaining admission and graduating from Harvard Law School. Not every year. Some years, of course, many years, there were none.
It was an era in which there was disfranchisement, lynchings in the South, there was segregation in the North. The early black graduates of the 1920s, Charles Hamilton Houston, Raymond Pace Alexander, began to involve themselves in civil rights controversies while they were still in law school. He was one of the most educated lawyers, black or white, of his time. And Houston eventually became the vice dean, essentially the dean de facto of Howard Law School.
He was joined there by other great Harvard Law School graduates, including William Hastie.
Coleman established an incredibly distinguished record at Harvard Law School.
I had finished being a law clerk to Justice Felix Frankfurter. I got a call from Mr. Marshall, and he asked me would I come down and begin to do some work.
It was an unusual thing because Harvard took a long time to get women graduates to begin with, and to have an African-American woman was especially important.
I think they believed that the admission of women was a sort of a pilot program,
And she is someone whose name should be known as well as William T. Coleman and Charles Hamilton Houston for being a trailblazer, doing something that had never been done before and has been rarely done since then, actually, when you consider the numbers.
The class of 1965, there was exactly one black student, the same number as there had been in George Lewis Ruffin's class almost a century before. Walter Leonard began a campaign to try to increase the number of black students at Harvard Law School. By 1968, there were something like between 12 and 15 students. By the time we got to 1969, it was probably 25. By the time we got to 1970, it was probably closer to 40. And by the early 1970s, there were something like 50 black students per class. There became pressure to have the faculty begin to represent the diversity that was in the student body. Derek had already been a leading civil rights lawyer at the Legal Defense Fund, and he really transformed Harvard Law School and transformed legal education, and he became someone who really pushed to bring other black faculty members on board.
It slowly grew, but it didn't grow as fast as I'd like it to grow. I wanted people to understand that we need to improve the representation of the African American faculty in a significant way.
I have always wanted to be a civil rights lawyer.
This was something that we had wished for, something I actually probably couldn't have imagined when I was here as a student. But when Derek Bell made his famous protest about this and actually left the law school, I wondered what would happen, but we were also happy when she came, and it's been amazing now to be on the faculty with Tomiko and Intisar, and it's astonishing that we've come so far with this.
Being here has been a struggle for black students for almost all of its history. Diversifying Harvard Law School has meant calling into question things that are taken for granted.
If George Lewis Ruffin arrived here today and he saw something like 800 or 1,000 black graduates from across the generations, he might have thought that he had landed on Mars. I'm sure he would be amazed. And he would be very, very proud. But he would challenge us, and he would tell us our work is not yet done.